Okay, guys. Peace. This is my first one. Thank you for coming. Lanique King, 100 watts. Everyone, tell me what y'all thought about the show tonight. Jay Davila, peace. Okay, so if y'all did not see what I wanted to talk about, so I really want to talk about, thank you, Abraham. Peace, Teddy. Bless me. Peace, everyone. Okay, y'all. So I'm going to be learning how to do this while I'm talking at the same time. So bear with me. But I wanted to talk about pretty privilege and protection. So I think a lot of, okay, you can't hear me? Can y'all hear me, everyone? Can y'all hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. Peace, Don. Okay, you can hear me? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, y'all. So what do y'all think about protection and with pretty privilege? Peace, Natalie. Peace, Maricela. Peace, Terry. Okay, so let's talk about it. You know how I am. I like to talk about Black issues coming from as a Black woman. So I think we spoke about this before about how that a lot of women in our community don't feel protected. So I want some people to tell me about protection, and do you think only pretty women feel protected? Okay, so Natalie says protection comes to those I believe are valued in society. I agree with that. So I think with our proximity, there's a lot of, when we talk about pretty privilege, it's the proximity to whiteness. That's personally what I believe. Peace, Cheryl. Thank you for coming. And so I'm going to put the link too. If someone wants to come up, I'm going to put the link in the chat. Yes, I agree with that, Bliss Me. So women they want to sleep with. Okay, so Sherelle says, I feel protected by the men in my life. I never thought anyone else should protect me. Okay, so I agree with that to an extent. I do feel like my husband should be the one protecting me. But what about women who don't feel protected, who don't have that pretty privilege, or who don't have anyone in their family who can protect them? What do we do with those women? What do y'all think about that? What should we do with those women who don't feel protected? Police? Okay, so does that work for us? Does that work for women that look like us? Let's see. Okay, Tristan. So he says, I don't know. I have gotten into fights because I felt there was a violation, not really about their looks. Literally Friday, I got into it because this guy said something offensive to the Dunkin' cashier. Okay. Yeah. So was she attractive, Tristan? Oh, she had a mask on. Well, you could still tell if she's attractive though. Did she have a body? So I think a lot of times we as women don't feel protected in our community because of that. So just like that whole incident where the woman was on the, I think, on the subway, and she was getting assaulted, and there was no one who protected her. Okay, so you said she was an old Indian lady. Okay. All right. So you will protect all women basically, no matter what they look like. And I think that's something too. Um a lot of times we talk about women our age, like 20s, 30s, 40s, but what about older women? What about the older women in the nursing homes who are not getting protected? How do we keep them protected? What do we do with the women in our communities who are not being protected, who are getting abused in the nursing homes? They don't have that pretty privilege. Okay, so Terry, I want to put Terry's comment up. However, I believe we are gods and we are beautiful regardless of genders. Yes, so I do agree with that. I believe that we're spiritual beings. So with spiritual beings, I think we put too much emphasis in our flesh for one. Um and so a lot of times when we put so much emphasis in our flesh, then our the our spiritual nature does not get the nourishment that it needs. So I do agree with that. And Natalie, they may go back to society's disrespect of the elderly and not valuing their experiences and wisdom. Mm, I like that, Natalie. I agree with that. So I think we do have a tendency to not value our elderly, but at the same time, I think the elderly that we I think you have to earn that. I think a lot of people, I've heard this, like the elderly, the elders in our community, they don't feel like we value them anymore. So do we have to earn that, like as elders in the community? Where are the stories that are being passed down? Who's passing down those stories? Who's passing down the things that we should be learning? Peace, chef. Let's see. Peace, Miss Dean. So I want to talk about the whole concept of the pretty privilege and competition against other women. So I know we touched on it before, that competition, and we usually learn that competition at a very early age. We learn it in our homes. We learn it. I think Hanifa touched on it today. She touched on how that that competition is learned with the two little girls. It was Kim Kardashian's daughter and Beyonce and Jay-Z's daughter. And so we have that competition that we learn at a very early age. And so we bring that on as Black women. So what do we continue? How do we continue? Why do we continue to compete for men if we say that that's not the prize? As a child, I didn't feel protected, nor was I protected. Okay. So yeah, so I think as a child, we don't feel protected. Some of us don't feel protected. I will say that there were times where I didn't feel as protected. I feel like there are times in our community where we may be protected in one area. So we might look as, oh, you don't need to be around these older men who are in their 40s. So you're a little girl, you don't need to be around those men. But the kind of young boys who are kind of hanging around the house or hanging around your cousins or who are your cousins, they don't see as you needing to be protected from them. So I think that's something that gets pushed under the rug too. We get a lot of times in our community, we get things get kind of swept under the rug because we're not seeing that we need to be protected on different areas. So I know a lot of girls who actually got assaulted just by people who were in the home with them. So that is an issue. So are we just protecting a certain group of women? And what women are we protecting? Are we protecting little girls? Are we protecting older women, or are we just protecting a certain age bracket? What do y'all think about that? Are we protecting a certain age bracket? Okay, so Denise said, I don't think there is a community where women aren't protected on a whole. The privilege is just that some may receive additional protection. Okay. I think that could be true. But I do think that there's a lot of women who don't feel protected. So I think there are a group of women who aren't protected. I think Black women as a whole don't necessarily feel as protected. But I do think there are protections that are in our society. But are we always being protected by those laws? Like there's laws that are in place for us, but are we always being protected? I mean, when you think about how many Black women are actually missing, or how many Black women who are actually um, dying, like, and I mean, protection is a lot because even going into the hospitals, you are, as a Black woman, sometimes you're lucky to come out that hospital alive. And I agree with that. You can't win them all. I do agree with that, Terry. How are we speaking about protection? So we're speaking about protection from different points of view. So the conversation is about pretty privilege and how are only women who are pretty, who are attractive, who men want to sleep with, are they the only ones worthy of being protected? Now, of course, all women are worthy of being protected, but that's not necessarily the case. We talked about it before that a lot of women are only being protected if they are attractive. So most times we protect those in our environment or those we would wish we can be in our environment. Yes. Peace, Hanifa. Peace, sis. Yes, I think that we are only protecting, a lot of times we're protecting those in our environment, but we wish are in our environment. So I think that culturally, we have a tendency to protect. And I think this is something that we deal with in our communities. We're always fighting for someone else. We're fighting for more than ourselves. Why do we push to fight for more than just ourselves all the time? Well, I would say, Abraham, yeah, I would say that, let me see. I'm sure there are pretty women who don't feel protected. Yes. I feel protected because I'm married, but I don't necessarily feel protected if I don't have my husband with me. I don't feel like a man is going to protect me, that he's going to stop and help me if I'm out and about and I don't have my husband with me. I live in Georgia now, and there's some shady areas around here. Like when I was in Louisiana, I was in my hometown, so I knew the area, but I don't know the area here. And sometimes I feel like if something happens to me and I don't have my husband with me, nobody's gonna stop and help me. I do feel that way. So Chef says in societies today, the elderly is seen as less valuable since their individualism, self-reliance, and independence would have been diminished. Yes, I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that, Chef. That's not necessarily true. Attractive women can be a target too. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Terry. What do you mean by a target? What does that mean? They can be a target too. Okay, so the women who are not in relationships have community and family protection to lean back on. Yeah, so there are some women who have community, but I think in our community, I said this before, we're broken in our community. So there's a lot of times where we're not feeling protected. Uh, there's a lot of us who don't know our family members. Our family members are broken. There's a lot of family who's not, I don't know, a lot of my cousins, y'all. And we just moved from Louisiana in May, and I went into the mall one time, and I didn't even I know my cousin, but I didn't know his children, and it was kind of embarrassing, like not to know someone who lives less than 15 minutes away from you. So I think that's an issue that we have to address, that a lot of relationships are being broken because of other issues prior from the prior generation that they're bringing into the current generation. So Tristan makes a good point. Can we protect without being offensive? We don't give the same amount of protection to our women from our family members compared to a stranger, because we tend to get more offensive to strangers. That's a good point. It's kind of like the guy who helps a woman on the side of the road because she's getting abused, but then she kind of turns it on him. So I think that is a real fear for men, that if they do try to help, that it's definitely going to come against them. So I definitely agree with that. Okay, Terry. So you said, I don't expect any man to protect me to begin with. I'm more concerned not to be a target. Okay. So would you say that being a target means that you would also need protection? I mean, because I would think that if you're a target, that someone would need to protect you. I don't necessarily walk around. Can y'all still hear me? Hope y'all can still hear me. Okay. So I don't think I necessarily need protection 24 hours a day, but I would like to think that if there was something happening to me and my husband is not around, that someone would protect, that someone would be willing to protect me as a, as a Black woman. So I think that is something that should definitely be, I'm not going to say it should be expected, because I don't think that we should actually always expect someone to do something for us. But what is community if you don't have that? If we don't have a community of people who are willing to protect us in our communities, aren't we just kind of fending for ourselves? Hanifa, there are birds in nature whose beautiful fathers attract a mate, but it also attracts predators. Okay, so yes. Okay, I see what you're saying. Thank you for clarifying that, Hanifa. So, yeah, so you can be targeted because you're beautiful. So let's talk about that. Like, can you be targeted because of what you are wearing then? So, are women targeted because of how they dress? I think that's a conversation that we tend to not want to have, because women don't want to necessarily think just because of the way that they look that they're being targeted. So, is that a concern? And should we be addressing that in our communities, the way that we clothe ourselves? Even when you see the certain things that we see that is being pushed in the media, like the way that we dress, and music videos. And if that's the case, do we have a right to say something, or do men kind of have a concern in that area of, well, she's dressing like this, so she's perceived? I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just asking the question. What do y'all think about that? Maricela says, I don't feel protected at all from any man aside from two. Reason I usually CC. CC. What is CC, Maricela? Okay, so there are men out there prey on attractive women in many forms. Yeah, I do think that's true, Terry. Okay, yes, someone come cam up with me, so I'm not talking. I feel like I'm talking to myself. So someone came up. Okay, so attractive women can be a target because those who acting like they're protecting them are just doing it for personal advancement. And once they get it, they might stop protecting them. So attractive women, yes. So there was something I was watching earlier today where there's this girl, she thinks, she's attractive. She was a pretty girl, but she was always also using her essence of being a pretty privilege, like manipulation, and then kind of using it as kind of a petty way to make herself feel better. So I think also a lot of times women are using that to manipulate. So how do we address that? Because some women actually may need protection, and then there's some women who are using it as manipulation. So men may not feel that they want to address any woman because they're feeling like maybe they're being manipulated. Yes. If anybody can tag JP, I would love. Now, something that JP said to me the other day, actually, we were kind of talking about this, and she was talking about, as far as a lot of times Black men don't protect Black women because of the fact that they see Black women as leaders in their home. So a lot of Black men have been raised by Black women. So they are seeing them as leaders, as women that don't necessarily need to be protected. It's kind of like what Hanifa was saying earlier today. Like, we are our sons' first gods, but if you don't have a man in the house at all, that's all you see. You see that woman as your protector because she's protecting you when she goes to that school system, or she's protecting you from people in that neighborhood. You see her as a leader. You see her as someone that you follow. You and some of these men want to be and grow up and be like their mothers in a sense, not necessarily, not talking about like homosexuality, but just they want to grow up and they vision their mothers being everything. So when it comes to protecting Black women, they don't see them as actually needing protection, as opposed to a woman who is from another culture who they might see as more feminine. So a lot of times when you're a single mother, you might have more masculine energy. You have to have that masculine energy to go about day to day. And so you are not necessarily wanting to uh, protect Black women because that's a subconscious thing. It's not necessarily you don't desire it, it's subconscious. You don't look at them as needing protection. And so if there's any guys who want to talk about that, please come up because I would love to hear if you feel that Black women, if you feel that Black women do not need, or do you, it's more of a subconscious thing of not needing protection because we see them as leaders. We see them as the leaders in our home as opposed to other cultures of women. So Chef says Asian societies tend to cherish grandparents much more than the West. It resonates within their culture. This is very true, Chef. I teach Asian students. And they are in the home with them. Most of my students are actually being taught by their grandparents. Their grandparents are the ones. I usually actually talk to their grandparents more than I talk to their parents because they are the ones there with them since they're young. The parents go out and work, and the grandmothers are there, or the grandfathers too are there, helping them with their schoolwork. And so they do. And honestly, Asian societies, they actually cherish a lot of things more. Education. They see their teachers as being family. Like their teachers are their family. So it's a lot different than how we view things in the West. I definitely agree with that. So we have Abraham. He's coming up. Peace, brother. Thank you for coming up. Can you hear me? Let's see. Hello? Abraham, are you there? Uh-oh. Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. So, what I was going to say is, with regard to your topic, right? Because you're dealing with two things. You're dealing with pretty privilege, and you're also dealing with being protected. Now, the whole argument about being protected. I mean, because you hear a lot of people say we're not being protected. We're not being protected. Um, I don't want to dismiss it, but I'm saying the way it's framed is kind of abstract, if you know what if I'm making any sense. So when you're saying being protected, can you be more specific? Are you talking about molestation? Just be a little bit more specific in what you're talking about, and then we can get into the meat and potatoes.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so when I'm talking about protection right now, I'm talking about how a lot of men don't necessarily want to protect women unless they are attractive. So that's really what I'm talking about. And that's like bringing the pretty privilege with the protection.
Mm.
So in essence, that has to do with several times a lot of protection, but usually we're talking about physical protection, because it was brought up on another show. I think it was like that last show or a couple shows we did, um, where we talked about how men, and there were men who actually said that I wouldn't stop and protect a woman if I wasn't actually in a relationship with her, or I wasn't actually trying to have sex with her. So I think we are talking about more of physical protection, as women in, I guess, in our age bracket, but then when we spread it out, elderly women are not necessarily being protected, and younger women are not necessarily being protected as well, because there's a lot of things that are happening in the homes or behind closed doors at grandmama or auntie's house or uncle's house that's not being addressed either. So protection starts, it has to start at a young age, but where does protection usually, where who are we more geared towards protecting? Like some.
Okay, so when you say that pretty women are receiving more protection, I mean,
Mhm.
like, what are you basing this off of? Like what's the black and white, or is this just anecdotal? Is this just your own personal experience? Because, like I said, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of pretty women who feel like they're not being protected, that they're being harassed, that
Mhm.
that men are sexually aggressive with them as well. So I'm just trying to understand, like, where are you getting this? That I do agree that pretty privilege exists, but when I think of pretty privilege, what I think of is women who are pretty could get away with a lot more than someone who's less attractive. That's what I think when I think about pretty privilege. Now, the whole thing about protection, yeah, you can say that some guys may have more motivation to look after somebody who's attractive, but maybe they have ulterior motives.
Right.
But I still feel like women who are attractive may feel as though they're not as protected, just as much as someone who's not as attractive.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree that, and to answer the question, your first question. So, yes, it's not necessarily my personal experience, even though there are things that did happen to me as when I was younger where I did not feel protected, and people did know certain things were happening, but I did not feel protected. I was not being protected. As opposed to when I would see other girls my age in other cultures, there were some people who were standing up for them, or even people in their community seemed to at least do something. But I think also we have to understand a lot of things are hidden. A lot of things, it's not something that I went around and said, hey, this is happening to me. So sometimes we don't even know that it's happening. But I think it's, for me, like, since I'm married, I do have my husband, but at the same time, I don't necessarily see that men are going to necessarily step up and say, "Hey, I'm going to protect you." But I see that they are more willing to protect other cultures of women. That's just, even when you talk about what happens when a woman goes missing, or when a black woman is killed versus when a white woman is killed, it's a different course of action. So at what point do we say that this is a community matter and we're just not passing it on to other people? Like, how do we put this within our community and say, hey, within our community, let's start having the conversation of actually protecting, and across the board from a young age to an older age.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I do think that I would say is more of a family thing. Like most guys are going to protect their wife and their children.
Mhm.
And when there is a sense of community, then everybody looks out for one another. But um, the, the foundation of any community is families, and all of our families are pretty much broken. I mean, like most families are not intact. Most families have,
Right.
like, 70-80% being raised by, most households in our neighborhood, 70-80% are single family households, single parent households. So we don't really have strong communities, so it shouldn't be a surprise that some of the things that are taking place um, are taking place.
Yeah. And I definitely agree with that. And I think it's just the conversation to be had, because we are like, I didn't have my father growing up in my household. So, I did have that protection, but I had lots of uncles and lots of cousins around me who could have protected me from some things that I should not have gone through. But at the same time, that's why I say the conversation, when are we gonna we'll start having that conversation, because they would probably be more inclined to help their daughters, someone that their relationship, their wives and things like that, because I know that my husband, he's going to do what he has to do for his daughters. And just like my cousins and my uncles, I'm pretty sure that they would do what they have to do for their daughters. But because I didn't have my dad in my house, it's it was a little bit different of some of the things that I did have to go through. And so I think that is kind of the conversation, like, are we only protecting people that we are immediately close to? And if that's the case, and we're just saying every like we have to fend for ourselves, then what is this, like, are we really trying to build community? Because a lot of us say that we're trying to build community, but is that really the case? I would like to hear what Sherelle has to say about that.
Can y'all hear
Sherelle, are
me?
you there? Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So, okay, first of all, I don't necessarily think that we're trying to build communities. I think
Okay.
it's a notion of it's a good thing to say, but I
Mhm.
think that typically for me to believe that we're trying to build communities, I would have to see the action of it. Just like when they say most women want to be married, but it seems like most women want a wedding, right? And they
Mm.
want gifts. But do they really want to be married? Because marriage is work. So
Right.
I can say that I want a good community, but building a strong community, it's work. So just saying that we want a strong black community is not building a strong black community. You actually have to be putting in the work. And I don't necessarily think that most people are really focused on trying to put in the work. And that's probably why the numbers never add up. Um, I'm gonna say the community that I came from with my dad, I was raised by a single father, but we all come from a different a neighborhood. In New Orleans, we're very territorial about whichever ward or project that we're from. And in a particular project that I'm from, in a particular ward that I grew up in, it's like I know everyone. I'm baby girl. So it doesn't matter what corner I go on, they know who my mother is, they know who my father is. They're going to protect me. All the men, even the people that are on drugs, the winos, like they're going to protect the kids. So I think as a kid, I grew up and I felt like, okay, I was protected. But my daddy always, raised my brothers to protect me and my cousins. And I come from a real male dominated family. So it's way more guys than it is girls. And it's like, I always knew, even when walking alone from the bus stop or walking to the store by myself, like, people know I'm this person's little sister, I'm this person's cousin. I'm like, they know who my family is, so they're gonna look out for me and they're not gonna mess with me. So I kind of never felt this whole notion of, oh, I'm not protected as a black woman, because I always felt like oh, I know people are not going to mess with me because I'm my daddy's daughter, I'm my brother's sister, I'm my cousin's little cousin. Like, so people know not to play with me. And in the same way, it's certain, communities that you're supposed to be in. I know that I'm not supposed to be on this other side of the neighborhood where I know they might not necessarily get along with my family. So I know I got to stay on my side of the tracks. You see what I'm saying? Because I might not have that same protection on the other side of the tracks. And I know that you said, like, if a white woman, something happens to them, the outrage is a little different. I think when you come into the black communities, the most populated times you see us together, it's probably is in neighborhoods or like that we would consider like hoods or neighborhoods that are really like low income. And a lot of times we're desensitized to the crime. So it's like it's normal to see men and women fighting. It's normal to see women fighting. It's normal to see people die. Like they even say my high school is cursed because every year we lose someone. And it's a high school, but every year someone dies. It's normal since when we're kids that we're gonna have to go to a funeral maybe 10 or more times a year. So it's like we want to be outraged, but we so desensitized because we can turn on the news and it's like somebody's dead again, and it's somebody's dead again, and it just becomes so normal to us. So what I want to see, like, how do we change the dynamic? But I want you to explain to me, like, what would protection look like from everyone? Because let's say me and my dude, we get into it and we're arguing, we're fighting. I wouldn't want a stranger to approach that because you know what I'm saying? I don't necessarily
Right.
know if my dude would pull out a gun or do something to a stranger trying to help me or benefit me. See what I'm saying? So a lot of times I don't even want to interrupt. The most I say is, yo, I think somebody called the police. Y'all might want to, take it in. And that'll probably, ring in their head like, oh, somebody called the cops, so we need to just chill or something or whatever. But to intervene, because I've always said it, like even with family members, if that man is having sex with you and he loves you and he'll beat you this way, what do you think you're gonna do to me? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm just a woman, and even if it was a man joining in, who's to say that he won't harm this man for interfering into something? So it's like it always gets a little tricky.
Cheryl, can I ask you a quick question? Now, you said that when you were growing up, you received protection from a lot of the men in the neighborhood all the way down to the winos, right? Now,
Right.
do do you think that that has something to do with the fact that you grew up with your father, and maybe these are friends of your fathers or your brothers, and with men there's more of like a fraternity. He like, that's my man's daughter, or that's my man's sister, or that's my man's niece. We got to look after. Do you think that may play a part in it? Whereas when you are, let's say, raised by your mother, and with some of the women, they may not have the same connections. Do you think that that's the case?
I think that definitely plays a part, a major part. That's why I'm like a big advocate for fathers in the home and black fathers to just really be influential into their children's lives. Because I know a lot of times with my friends, what we might bump heads about when I'm telling them like be with your kid because I think men always feel like if I don't have the finances and I can't provide for my child, then I'm not a good father. But I can tell you that because my dad came from an older time, my daddy doesn't even know how to use a smartphone. You know what I'm saying? So the jobs that he would get back in the day, it kind of started slowing up. So we would have a lot of financial struggles, but I'm still who I am today because he never left me. Love doesn't just leave. That protection and that provision doesn't leave. So
Mm,
it's like I always say, these dudes love their broke ass mama so much they'll go sell drugs. So it's not
mhm,
like your son is not going to love you because you couldn't buy him Jordans. My dad has never bought me Jordans still to this day, and I'm 27. So it's like it's not like your son is not going to love you, but that protection, that provision, that's why they love their moms. Because my mom is here on even on the rainy days, even on the days that we may not have nothing, we're here. The lights are off, we're still here as a family unit. She's not going to abandon me. You know what I'm saying? So I do feel like that. So even though my daddy didn't always have the finances, his protection was always sound. And because of that, I do feel like that played a major part. But my mom was still in the same neighborhood as me. So even if somebody didn't know I was my daddy's daughter, they would know it's my mom's daughter. You know what I'm saying? And that made, because my mama friends were a lot of, drug users or winos and stuff like that. But I mean, I can still go into that same community today, that same exact community that I grew up in. My grandmother's house, that it's been in the family for over, I guess, 60 something years now, you know, and it's a lot of black homeowners in it. And some of them lost their houses, but for the majority, there's a lot of black homeowners there. There's like a older lady. She's the grandmother of our neighborhood. There's an older man, which he's like my grandfather, and he's 95, and he's like the grandpa of our community. He owns a lot of different businesses in the community, and it's like we're all, a lot of stuff go, but when it comes to the children and the women, like we're always going to be able to step in, intervene, and have that type of community. So I think when you come from a strong community, it can be better. But I'm not saying that, okay, so I got this protection in the fourth wall, I got this protection in the ninth wall. I'm not telling you I can go uptown in the third wall and still have that same protection. You see what I'm saying? Because they don't know me there. So I wouldn't feel protected there. But I never thought that I should have protection everywhere. That's why I said, like, I carry a gun because I'm over the road now, right? So I'm everywhere, every state, all over the place, but I mean, I still, like, if I have an issue with my truck, um, men of every race, I've had African men, I've had black men, I've had white men, I've had Arabian men. They stop and they're nice and they help. So, I don't necessarily feel like I benefit from pretty privilege or whatever because I'm real tomboyish. So, so I'm not like really a girly girl. I was raised by a single father. So, I've never been there. I've always been more tomboyish. So it's like, I'm not even like the hot woman that looks like a damsel in distress. I'm real homegirl vibes. You know what I'm saying? But I still feel like if I invite people in to help me and I'm appreciative and receptive to it, like I received that. So I think another thing that you might have to approach is what type of relationships do women have with men, because a man can't protect you if you don't want to allow him to protect you. But if women have already a very toxic type of relationship with men and they feel like all men do is come and hurt people, it's like if a stranger walks up to you, you automatically think this person is trying to harm me. You know what I'm saying? Or this person is, even like if it's simple something of them holding the door. So, I think like that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Sherelle. And just even when you were talking about you being in an altercation, like you being in a situation with your dude, and then someone comes and they might end up doing something to them that you don't necessarily agree with. So I think that's something that we have to address in a way where it's not, I think the way that we look at things in our community is very toxic anyway. So because the question I would ask, and I'm going to let Natalie speak, but the question I would ask of that is, what kind of altercation would you be having with, like, your boyfriend or whomever, and it would be a situation that would escalate where it would turn into something else?
I think, especially in my age range and what I grew up seeing, is that a lot of time relationships turn into physical altercations. And it's nothing that I've never not seen that's normal. Because I've seen like girls fight with their boyfriends, especially in New Orleans. Like the girls, they fight men all the time. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of times people won't step into the situation because I've seen people, really lose their lives by stepping into another person's situations so many times. So many times it could be a life or death situation just because you're trying to step in and protect and squash some type of differences. And the person will take it up with you and take your life because they just feel like you're not supposed to be in their business. So when I seen the extreme side of that, it does make you, second guess, should I step in? You know what I'm saying? Because
Mhm.
another thing is just like, if it's like my sister and her dude or my friend and her dude, they might wind up not liking me just because I interfere. You see what I'm saying? They
Mhm.
might, or it might be brothers or a brother and a sister fighting, and because brothers and sisters they fight all the time too, and it's like you jump into that and then they turn around and now they on you. So I've seen that just do a full circle.
Okay. All right. So, well, I'm gonna go ahead. Natalie, peace, Natalie. Thank you for coming out.
Hey everyone. So, for me, when I think about protection and when it comes to, let's say, Black women per se, I think it goes back to the breakdown of the first community that you have. Unfortunately, back in the day, you could think about, the specific roles that were in your household were necessary for you to feel protection. And if at that point that male figure had to exit the home, be it death, incarceration, military, your community stepped in. So that gave you this, not even it gave you a sense of protection. But I think even at these days, well, in these days, individuals don't talk to each other. Chances are you don't know the person who lives next door to you. So oftentimes there's a breakdown in communication. I remember the days of block parties where you could easily come together with people that lived around you. You would share stories. It goes back to what you're saying earlier in terms of how we passing down legacy, how we having
Mhm.
those conversations. There's a complete breakdown. It'll take years for us to figure out how to get back to that place. But I think when it goes back to not recognizing we don't have connection, it's more on a survival level. You won't find individuals wanting to protect each other because they don't have the connection. It's more difficult to say, I'm going to step in and risk my life for someone who may not even take value in me
Mhm.
sacrificing or laying my life down for you. I find it more oftentimes women band together. I could even use an experience yesterday that I noticed. Um, a man literally was bumping women back and forth out of the subway. It blew me away. He went toe to toe with a woman, was ready to fight her, and not one man stepped in. Now, this goes away from how a woman looks. That's
Mhm.
secondary. But when
Right.
you think about a man wanting to fight a woman and all the women banded together, like you're about to get your ass beat if you try that, it blew me. But I saw sisterhood in that moment. It blew me away. But it let
Mhm.
me know that there's such a fundamental breakdown in the way that we experience relationships, even if they're not intimate. It'll be harder for you to see someone say, I'm going to lay my life down or I'm going to protect you, this, that, and the third. But when it goes back to pretty privilege and seeing a woman who may just happen to look attractive, that's a gift and a curse. Because at the same time, you may be afforded specific privileges just off the strength of what you look like. Those same aesthetics can make you a target for assault, for we know what else, and other types of horrible behavior. So it's pretty difficult when you're looking at it from the layered approach. I think overall the community is so broken up, and however you want to look at community, we have to get to a point where it's more like I have to save myself before I'm over here trying to save you. And it's not even being selfish. It's about saying, I need to be honest with myself. I don't know the person that lives down the street from me anymore. It's one of those situations. So I think we have a lot of work to do when it comes to protection and even what we define as protection and who we expect to protect us. If we go to institutions, think about how a Black woman will go into a hospital and chances are she's going to die because
Mhm.
of lower level medical care. We think about the justice system, how that might adversely affect. There's so many levels to it, but it's a conversation that's needed, but it's mind blowing when you just see it on a like anecdotic level. It's mind blowing.
So, Natalie, in your opinion, who should be protecting us?
I think it's difficult to say that I want the man that's sitting next to me to protect me, because
Mm-hmm.
I carry my mace, and I hear Cheryl when she talks about conceal and carry, because it's coming to a point where you
Mm-hmm.
it's just almost disgusting when you see what women have to deal with out here. But it's not to say every man is the perpetrator. There's a lot of mental health illness that's running rampant. I see it on a daily basis in New York, and I happen to work in the field, so it's totally different. But when it comes to protection, it would be a situation where you would hope that young women, if we're going to speak about young women, that they have the opportunity to learn what protection looks like, so they're not chasing it. It
Mm-hmm.
goes back to even what Cheryl was saying. You're in a domestic incident with your man, and someone's trying to save your life, and you're over here having Stockholm syndrome, messing around, going back to the man that's abusing you. So it's more about
Right.
those lessons. How are we getting taught to be protected? How are we getting taught to respect ourselves? And that runs the gamut: black, brown, white, well, whatever, different types of women. It looks,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things that's important. And it's more about where is the message coming from. So if we had strong centers, if we had elders passing those messages to tell us, like, girl, don't allow this man to touch you or hit you, and it be understood that they're trying to help you,
Mm-hmm.
we might be in a better place. I think there was this one meme that I saw back in the day. No, not back in the day, maybe 5 years ago. It said the breakdown of the family is when you didn't have a chance to break the green beans with your grandmother. Like, I had my grandmother growing up. I
Mm-hmm.
lost her when I was 17. She was
Mm-hmm.
like 85, 89. Well, she had a couple birthdays. That's a Caribbean thing. But I think she was either 85 or 89. And when I tell you the lessons that I learned, and I could move about the world understanding that although I looked a certain way, that wasn't what's going to carry me through this world. It's mind blowing. So it's like in tandem. You're taught about yourself by your first community, which is the family. But then how you move about in the world is what the outside sees and tells you. And I think because I'm from New York, you have to have a thick skin and you have to be able to move a certain way. So it's so important to have those lessons. But I think it's time for us to find ways to bring those specific role models and figures back into the home.
Right. So that definitely starts with us. I mean, because I'm all about trying to find the solution here, um, to a place. Because I think just like, Abraham was saying, like, we're not all gonna ever all going to feel like we're all protected. I think it's hard to always please everyone at one time. There's going to always be someone who feels maybe left out, maybe like they're not being protected. But I do think that we have to get to a place where the consensus is feeling that way. So I like what you said, Natalie. I definitely like that we have to get back to that place, and we're going to have to become the elders to our grandchildren and passing those things down. We're going to have to be teaching our children how to, and even I think Terry said it in the chat, like we have to teach ourselves how to be protected emotionally, how to protect ourselves emotionally and physically, and not necessarily rely on someone to always protect us. Because a lot of times I do say that protection looks a certain way. It does look like emotional protection and physical protection and mental protection but we also have to take ownership of that as well. Like we can't always be relying on someone else to protect us from every little thing. And so I think it's all of it has to come together. And so what do and Abraham, I would kind of like you to chime in on this. Who are you willing to protect?
First and foremost, my family first.
Hmm.
Um, I think someone mentioned something about the a woman being um, raped on a train. Something. Oh, I'm sorry. Uh, Violated. I don't mean to
Hmm.
use the R word. Um, I don't know that I could sit back and watch. I, I I I would feel compelled to get in there and do something. But I I don't know. Like I want to go back to like what like Cheryl was saying um, when she talked about her father. I think where we are now is that you have a lot of men who were boys and raised by single mothers, and you've heard this trope about being independent and not needing a man. And I feel like for a lot of men that's ingrained in subconsciously that yeah, they don't need us, they'll be all right. I'm not saying that that's correct, but I think that that's a lot of what you see going on. I don't know if I'm making much sense, but um, to my mind, that's what I think is happening.
Yeah, I do. I agree with that. I think that we do have a tendency. I think that when you start saying that you don't need a man for one thing, then you're starting to say you don't need a man for almost anything. And I think someone even said it before in another chat. They were saying that we have all of these luxuries now. You know, we can go and we can get our food delivered. We can get almost anything. Anything we want, we can have at our fingertips. If we want to please ourselves, we can find a way where we don't need a man for it. So when we start saying that we don't need a man for one thing, we're saying that we don't for lots of things.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't need a man until you do, right?
Right, right,
It's just like how in a lot of our communities people hate the police until they need 'em. You
right.
know what I mean? And things are about to get hectic out here. It's about to be like the Hunger Games. I mean, you see where this economy is going. You see inflation going up. Um, at one point, when you look at New York City it was gentrifying and it was kind of safer, but violence level in New York City is rising back to like how it was back in the 90s. So things are changing across, across the country. So this notion that you don't need a man, I think I don't think it's a good philosophy to embrace.
Right. And Sherelle, I would like you to chime in on that as far as because do in your generation, do you see a lot of women in your generation? Because I know I was kind of growing in that generation when I was like in my early 20s and late teens, early 20s. I That's when we were starting to hear that a lot. I don't need a man. Now, I never said that, but I do know that there were girls my age who did say that. Do you hear that a lot in your generation?
Yeah, definitely. I say it a lot.
You say it
So
a lot. Okay,
yeah,
so
I
do
say it a
you feel
lot.
that way?
Yeah, I don't necessarily I don't, at this point I just feel like I'd rather not deal with it. I just feel like the pros and like the cons just outweigh the pros. And it's not like saying I'm not saying that I don't need men in society. I need the men in my family. I need my dad, I need my brothers, I need my cousins, I need them. Of course, I need, every man that does everything because men are a big part of society. But far as on a daily basis in a relationship with a man, nah. I just don't see. I mean, I don't know. I got my Glock, and I understand that you know there's going to be cons to choosing this life too. I just rather deal with the consequences of this life being alone versus the life of being with a man. The consequences that could come with being with a man.
Okay. So what are those consequences? Like, what do you feel? Is it because of where you grew up, you feel that there are worse consequences?
Yeah. And to piggyback off what Natalie was saying, because she mentioned something that I always mention, which is Stockholm's. And
Mhm.
as the friend with no child, a lot of people always dismiss what I say, but I tell my peers that their children have Stockholm syndrome. And I always ask people, who taught you love? Because a lot of times, love was taught to you by the same people that would curse you out. Because I'm big, I really am so vocal on people who curse their kids out, like little kids, like under the age of 10, and you're calling them the B word and telling them, you're telling them negative stuff, calling them
Yeah.
ugly, calling them little black bee and stuff like that or whatever. Because it's like you're teaching them how to love, even with
Mhm.
people. Like, I can't tell somebody don't fight in your relationship. If y'all fight and y'all think it's okay, but I do get on my peers about fighting in front of their kids, and the kids being desensitized to that, because that's teaching your sons to put their hands on women when they get angry. That's teaching your daughters that you can stick with a man that'll put his hands on you. So a lot of times I feel like, who really taught us love? Who, like, love is so toxic coming from this. So when I get into a relationship and a man is putting his hands on me and he's disrespecting me and he's calling me out my name, my mom loved me and she did the same
Mhm.
thing to me, right? And my daddy
Mhm.
loved me. Well, most people don't necessarily deal with the daddy, but they deal with the daddy abandoning them, right? So
Mhm.
this man comes around when it's convenient for him, but he's not permanently in my life protecting me and providing for me. He abandons me a lot. So now when I grow up, I'm attracted to men who don't necessarily have to protect and provide for me. He can come and make me feel good, because some fathers
Mhm.
do just come for birthdays and holidays, make you feel good, but they're not there 100% of the time. So now I'll deal with a man that's just willing to make me feel good and then move on and abandon me. And because this is how I've been taught love is, I'm okay with it, because it's a brainwashing thing, and brainwashing is real. See what I'm saying? So it's not like I want to just look down on people who see it. So I'm saying you do have to go to therapy and break it, because like I said, if even as a black woman, if I would have been adopted by a Chinese family and took to China, I would not speak the way I speak. I would not think the way I
Mhm.
think. I would not believe the way I believe. So, yes, everything that I've been taught from the people who had me from a young age in the environment that I grew up in, it has shaped me into who I am. And it is, my perception is real to me, because I know this is reality for me when I walk out my front door.
I I 100% agree with you, Sherelle. I think we learn that toxicity in our homes, and we learn even the lack thereof. I always say, and this kind of goes to more is it's kind of going into a different area, but I've always said that the women I've had more experiences with toxicity with women than I have with men, because I learned my first example of kind of toxicity or of um feeling, and I hate to say this because like you don't want to talk about the people that you care about, but at the same time I had that first example of that in my pride, like as a child. So if you're, and I just had a conversation with on another channel the other day, and we were kind of talking about the same thing, because we learn toxicity in relationships because we're learning toxicity in our homes. So when your mother is, or your mother or your father or whomever, your grandmother, your auntie, whoever it is, they are spanking you, but then they tell you, "Oh, well, I'm doing this because I love you." So why do you're going to kind of believe as you grow up subconsciously. It's not necessarily a conscious thing, but it's a subconscious thing. Oh, well, this guy who's beating on me loves me too. And so then we start adapting to that kind of struggle love mentality. Oh, he loves me. If he's not hitting on me, if we're not fighting, if we're not arguing, if we don't have that back and forth, then it's not really love. Because at a young age, I learned that that's what love actually was to me, and that was on a very subconscious thing. So that's definitely, I agree with that. And even the, oh, well, he's not even, my dad's not here, but he comes around whenever. And then we kind of adapt to that. Even within our relationships, we adapt to, oh, well, just because he's going over here doing something else doesn't mean that he's not really into me. So I definitely agree with that, Sherelle. Natalie, I like your opinion on that. So, um, what do you feel about the whole idea of not needing? I feel like I know what you're gonna say, but not needing that man, or our generation, or this generation and the younger generation saying we don't need men.
It's funny. I want to know what you think I was going to say, but I'll say what I'm going to say. But it's so funny because I remember the whole, you don't need a man situation and yada yada. And I wasn't for it. I didn't understand
Mhm,
the reasoning behind that. And it wasn't simply because, I might have had, boyfriends or saw that it made sense to have a male, counterpart, even going through college or high school, yada yada. I just felt like those are two components, and I didn't see why you couldn't have both. Why couldn't you
mhm,
travel, live your best life, still have a man? And if you chose not to have one for whatever reason, relationships look different. You could have had a long distance. I was a huge proponent of long distance relationships at one point, but I always found value in having a companion. And it wasn't to say simply because I needed somebody, but it was always good to have that male perspective in your life. I just happened to be a woman that had a lot of male friends from the time I was in high school to even now. I had a lot of male friends. So I always had the male perspective. But remember, those perspectives were not from an intimate level. So it changes the conversation. And
mhm,
also, when you have male friends, you have to be mindful. Sometimes what they're telling you, of course, it's going to be helpful in the relationships you have. It may not be as sound as you think it should be. Not to say they're trying to, mess up the relationship, but I say all that to say, when it came to the whole, I don't need a man, yada, yada, I'm going to travel, I'm going to do this, that, and the third, I didn't see the value of doing that because it felt like you had to be one dimensional. You could have everything. And the sad part about it, it's like even going back to, you know, whether or not you can have kids at a certain age because you lived your life a certain way. I see a lot of friends that I have now that wish they could have went backwards and maybe had that man for some years. I don't think you're less, or like I don't think you're weak for, wanting to have a man in your life, or not to say
mhm.
necessarily depending on him, but there's value in having a man in your life. And that's
Right.
probably why some women maybe looking at protection as something they cannot have because they don't know what it looks like in real time. And that's not their fault because it's layered. You may not
Mhm,
have had it growing up. You don't have it in your current life now. So it's kind of difficult to balance it. But I think at the end of the day, when you're looking at how you're going to have protection, it's so important to be mindful of where you're seeking that protection and why that protection is important for you. Because a woman may say, I don't need it. But then at the same time, we just have to have the conversations as to why. Because I really enjoyed how Sherelle opened up her answer. Who taught you how to love? That tells you a lot about how you see the counterpart that would be your life mate
mhm,
at the end of the day. So I think there's a balance there. It's so layered as to why people don't feel the need to have that man in their lives. I'm not a damsel in distress at all, but I have no problem acting like one when it's necessary. Oh, can you do that for
Right.
me? I'm good.
Right. Right.
I'm good with that. But it's like you have to have a balance. I think there's the feminine that's brought out of you when you feel protected.
And
That's
I
what.
think there's strength. It's funny
Yes.
because when Hanifa brought up uh Samson and Delilah, and she said Samson, the story of Samson kind of being weak, but I just look at Delilah being strong. Like her
Right.
femininity was her strength, and she was able to take down a man that was very strong. So it's, and I don't even want to say take down because that's kind of the narrative that is kind of put out there. We don't know. They could have been madly in love. I don't know. But
Hmm.
at the same time, it's that I think that we can use our femininity as our strength, just like men can use their masculinity as their strength. So I think when we start looking at not necessarily being damsels in distress, but being our that in essence that balance that we need with one another, that harmony that we can have with one another, and not necessarily saying I'm going to manipulate that person or he's going to manipulate me or I don't need them. But like you said, I like had saying like, yeah, you go change the tire. You
You
know,
take
I
out the
don't I
trash.
don't need right, you take out the trash. I don't need to do those things. Not saying that I can't do those things. I'm saying that I like not having to do those things.
Right.
And I like to be able to focus on other things because as women, we use our femininity to be creative. So, and to create certain things. And so, if I have that, like, even there's some things that my husband told me, like, hey, you go do that. You know, you've done enough. Like, you sit back, chill out now, and you go do certain things. And because you have been doing this for so long. So, when we can have that balance with one another, and then we can start creating that change. Because it was just me and my mother since I can remember. And so it wasn't until I actually had daughters, and I have two sons and two daughters, but it was when I had my daughter where I was just like, man, a girl really does need her father. And I didn't realize, like, I would miss it when I would see like other girls with their fathers, but I didn't realize how much I was really missing out until I saw that. One of my favorite things is for my girls to say, "Hey, daddy," when he walks into the door. So, that was some of those things, and just the different things that he can be able to tell them about men that I wasn't told, or how I would be taken advantage of, and all of those things. Those are things that are needed, not just physical protection, but these little girls need their minds protected from guys who might be trying to take advantage of them. So I definitely think I really appreciate all of you and everything that you have said. We still have about 13 people in the chat, but I just want everyone, Abraham, Sherelle, Natalie, before we go, just to, I guess, just give me what you think protection should look like in our community, starting out, like right now, what that should look like for us, and is that something that we can achieve in the long run, like, so that the consensus, I don't think everyone will feel protected, but where the consensus kind of will feel protected. I'll Abraham, you can go first.
Okay. I just, and I really don't want to sound negative, but um, I just don't see it the
Okay.
way things are going right now with this, because there's really a lot of antipathy, and men and women have this like this acrimonious relationship where there's a lot of finger pointing and recrimination. You know what I mean? And until we learn again, because I mentioned this like on another stream where I said, until we learn to speak to each other and quit talking past each other, we're never going to resolve these issues. You have women who believe that they can't trust men, that men are after one thing, so you might as well get them before they get you. And you have men who believe that, hey man, women are going to try to get you, so you might as well just try to focus, hit it and quit it. And as long as we continue to have those type of attitudes, or women feel like everything is a man's fault, or men feeling like everything is black women's fault, I just don't see it. Because in order for us to have the type of protection that you're talking about, it's going to require us to have some type of loyalty to one another that I just don't see us having right now. I just don't see it. Um, Also, when it comes to protection, I feel like protection also begins at home. And I don't feel like a lot of these mothers, and I'm not trying to disparage any mothers, but I just don't believe a lot of these mothers are protecting their kids. You know, you have some women who, for whatever reason, maybe the father is not providing enough, was it child support, and so they may withhold the child from the father, but then have a boyfriend and allow the boyfriend to play daddy. And some of these guys are unsavory characters. Man, you have a lot of instances where it's the mother's boyfriends that's molesting these kids. You know what I mean? It's just, so protection starts at home. And I know it's late and I'm a little tired, so I don't want to ramble too much, so because I know I'll start to not make sense. But that's
And
my.
I agree with that. And that's kind of what I was trying to come at, is that we kind of narrow it down to protecting like a certain age bracket. But I agree, it does start at home. And like I said, there were some things that happened in my community. And I saw at a young age, and I saw even when I was in high school, and I saw young girls in certain areas not being protected. And it's one of those things where we definitely have to start at a very young age. And that's why I say, and like Sherelle said, like she feels protected by the men in her community. Well, there's a lot of women that are not feeling protected by the women in their community, but that has by the men in their community, but that has a lot to do also with the women in our community, because they are not allowing the men to be be protectors. So, because what if in Sherelle's case, her mother was like, no, you're not going to be, and she wouldn't have that. She wouldn't have someone who was showing her how to even protect herself. So I think that's very true. I agree with you with the loyalty. I'm a very loyal person, but everyone is not loyal in our community. And so it's one of those things where I do have hope, because we are having these conversations, but at the same time, I do know we have a long way to go before everyone feels that they are protected, because I can pick out different times in my life, from when I was a little girl, high school, middle school, college, where I did not feel protected for whatever reason. And there were times when people did know about situations, and then there were times when people didn't know. So that is something, but because I did feel that way, I am kind of overly protective of my daughters. So it's kind of one of those things. It's kind of like, if you didn't have that, then you do try to make sure that your children have that. So I think that's something that it's something that kind of helps, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that you're not kind of shielding them from the world too, or protecting them too much. Um, Sherelle, what about you? Because I know you have kind of a different viewpoint. What do you think about what protection should look like now, and if we, or in the future, or do you think that we should only be protecting our community, like our little, like our circle of influence in a sense?
Okay, so what I'm gonna say is that I don't necessarily feel like it's ever gonna be a point where we can protect every single person
Mhm.
because, okay, so look at it from this: we have people that live in Beverly Hills, and then we have people who live in like real normal, nice middle class communities, and then we have those same people of this particular race that live in trailer parks, right?
Mhm.
We don't necessarily have that in the black community. I feel like our elites live among other elites, but they're always the minority. I feel like our middle class are the minority in the areas that they live in. And then I feel like the overpopulated version of us is always in the hood. So, what I can say is when I first started coming on YouTube, when on a lot of other shows, I can see a lot of like gender warring, and I didn't see that this was helping. But when it comes to like shows like this, shows like King, and we having the conversations, we really built the online family, we built the online community, and I think
Mhm.
this is just what we need. Even if majority of all the shows are trash, I love that we can come here and we're going to have positive conversations here and we're going to build here. So maybe we can start doing that in the real world where we can start creating communities, black communities, for where we're gonna have rules for this community. Everybody's protected. We carry ourselves in a certain way. We build Montessori's for our children, and we teach our children. I think that we should start, even if it's just a small, where we buy a couple of acres of land and it's only 50 of us, and it's just like a real small community, and we build it in a couple of major cities. But it's just black people that's signing up that's saying, I want to be surrounded by my people to where I'm not feeling disconnected or ostracized, but I want to be connected and surrounded by the best of my people. And I don't necessarily mean by this person has money. I just mean by people with morals and people with strong codes of ethics that are looking to push the community forward. So I would hope that we could start just building communities, whether and it could be middle class, low class, either way, but just positive spaces where black people can thrive with each other. They don't have to feel ostracized because they live in Beverly Hills and they might be the only black person in the whole block. So the police is looking at them like, why are you even here? But I don't necessarily feel like the only place that we should be able to be around each other is in the hood. But we know that majority of the stuff that's going on in the hood is negative. So we might not be able to take the hood, just like people can't change the trailer park. We gotta leave the people who don't wanna be positive to thrive where they wanna thrive. But we have to start moving in circles, just like we created this space outside of Manosphere where everything is just like, I blame the black man, I blame the black woman
Mhm.
for this. We created this positive space. We have to take that into the real world and start creating positive communities. Um, I think black men have to, regardless, they have to let go about the money thing, because I get it. In America, money might mean a lot. See what I'm saying? But we've never been the richest here. You see what I'm saying? So we got to put love and structure in there. So I do feel like black men are going to have to really be more influential in their children's lives, and black women are going to have to allow that. It's not about child support, it's not about a check. It's about that black man loving his child, being able to protect his child, being able to build structure, and then to connect with each other so they can have like neighborhood watch programs, or just, fathers of fathers, and just building. But because I see this, I definitely can see that happening. I'm not saying it may happen tomorrow. What I'm saying is, if we get enough positive people to just come together and say, we're going to create something good even in the midst of all this chaos. Because all over YouTube right now, it's I hate the black woman, I hate the black man. And in 1 month, we've created this space to where I don't hate the black man. I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna have a conversation with Abraham. He ain't told me, asked me my dress size, told me I was, you know what I'm saying? He hasn't
Right.
disrespected me not one time. We're really sitting here having a conversation and we're building. That shows that there is people that want work. Even the men that show up in the chat every day, the women that show up in the chat every day, us just greeting each other. It feels like a family. We love
Mhm.
each other. We the rocks, we the flowers. Like we love each other and we're building. We really want to listen to what people have to say. So if anything is proof that we have hope, this is proof. What King built in that just in this short time, because it's going to get bigger, because it's attracting people, because it's not a debate where we have to constantly debate. You know what I'm saying? Like it's we stand in respect even when we disagree with each other, and we're trying to build towards something positive. So that's just what it has to be like. We have to focus on these kids, loving them, and then connecting with positive people. Even if it don't have to be the majority of us. You know what I'm saying? The majority of people aren't rich, but they still thrive as the richest people. See what I'm saying? So we don't
Mhm.
have to be the majority. But we could still thrive. And then when people start saying, okay, we did it, more people will join, more people will come, it'll attract more people will be able to see that this is the waves. But I do feel like we're creating the ripples. You know what I'm saying? Even if it's not a tidal wave, but we're creating that friction to where yeah, we can love each other and we can heal and we can move forward.
I love every part of what you said. That is what I've been preaching for years, not on YouTube, but I've been preaching it. We definitely have to talk behind all of this, behind closed doors, and really get communities going. There was an elder who was speaking the other day on another platform, and she was saying that she's from England, but she moved to Gambia, and she was talking about how all of the houses um in in that, well, at a certain point in time, all the houses are even, because no matter how much money you had, no matter what your class status was, everyone was thought to be seen as this on the same level. Everyone was thought to be seen even, so it didn't matter about your money. It was just about coming together as a community and building. And so I agree with you. You don't have to have We don't have to have everybody. We don't have to have, I think a lot of times we look at trying to have every black person, or every black person in our community. We need to get them together. And just like Justin Witt said in the comment, Marcus Garvey said everybody cannot come. Everybody, I'm not interested in taking everybody with us. And so I agree with everything that you're saying. I agree that because we're having these conversations, that we do have hope that we can build on what we're talking about right now. We can build on it, and we can come together. We can pull our resources together and build communities that, just like we have built communities in the past, but we do have to have I preach this all the time, a code and culture in our community. If we have a code and culture in our community, and I was talking about this book the other day. Powernomics is one of the books that kind of shows you what you need. If you do something inside of the community, then there's has to be repercussions for you in the community. Just because you look like us doesn't mean that you can stay in that community if you did something to someone, or you assaulted someone, or you stole something. So I agree with every word that you said, Sherelle. And so, Natalie, what do you think about either what we said, or just about what you think about the future of our community, as far as protection goes, or as far as our community outlook goes?
I mean, I look at it from like the micro and the macro level. And we always talk about how huge the diaspora is. Whether you're African, you may be Caribbean, you're born here, it's always going to look different. But I think the most important thing is looking at what our intent is. Once
Hmm.
intent is figured, you have to look at individuals' belief systems. How are they moving in accordance to what you're trying to put out there? And then after that, At the end of the day, do you have the resources? Can everyone come together? Bottom line is everyone can agree. It's just that simple. We're humans. We're going to put our needs above others. But at the end of the day, if the preferences look similar, and then you think about the needs that you have at the same time, your risk level drops. But at the same time, you're going to need individuals that are going to step up. And it always goes back to my belief system is going to look different. But am I looking toward some goal? And it has to be inclusive. Individuals don't want to move toward anything if they don't feel included. If you're not a real participant within the action moving forward to view this community, whatever it may look like, to garner protection for the women, the children, the elderly, and even the men, because I think men always get left out of that equation when it comes to their emotional and mental health, as well as their well-being. It has to be that situation, pulling all those resources together, getting individuals who want to get involved, and then moving forward. Throughout the process, you're going to see who is quote unquote weak and falls off, not because they don't have the strength. They may not have the agency to do so, or their mental capacity, physical, or whatever capacity doesn't fall in line with what's needed for that struggle. But I think it's going to be so layered. It's going to take time, but we also have to have conversations around what do you want to do moving forward? And if it doesn't align, it's understood, that's fine. But you have to be mindful of the individuals who might be agents within that movement that may not work for it. And it's not even because they want to tear it down. It might just be psychologically they're not there.
Right.
And we need to start throwing mental health counseling into these conversations too, because there's a lot of individuals who don't feel protected because of what they saw growing up. And then we just have to be mindful of the fact that that's not an indictment on people who've seen traumatic experiences. It's more of a situation now is how are we going to help heal them? You can't solve the issue, but if you can put certain mechanisms in their hands to say, maybe you want to try this, not even a spoon feeding, but maybe you want to try this, or I can be a support to you as much as I can, because I can't force feed you now, but I'm going to put the resources in front of you. What you do with it after I give you that support is how we can get everyone together. But I think that's how we have to do it. It's going to be block by block. If you really want to do that kind of advocacy work, you have to know people around you. And then remember, we're in so many different silos, like your family circle, your community circle, your work circle, your social circle. How are you dropping nuggets in all those circles? And then that's how we come to some kind of agreement. And hopefully you'll find a solution.
I love that, Natalie. And I think of when David Banner said that within the conscious community, he said we have to start making consciousness. And I think of it, it doesn't necessarily even have to be consciousness. When we're talking about building or we're talking about community, we have to make it look attractive. Which doesn't look attractive to most people because they see it as, oh, that's going to take a lot of work. That's going to take too long. I don't want to do all of that. So we have to start trying to figure out how is it going to not only look attractive, but it's also going to look doable so that we can create change. Because a lot of people, they would be willing to get help if they could afford it. Some people can afford to get to go get mental health. Some people can afford to they might think even pulling resources together is too difficult. So, and then they might think it takes too long. So I think these are all things that we do need to discuss, and we need to start. We start within our own homes, but we branch out into our communities, and then we start looking at people who we want to align with and saying, hey, are we going to come together and build this community in this area? I mean, Dr. Claude Anderson, he said, some of us are going to have to get up and move. Let's move to other areas, especially if that is a large population of like-minded people in that area. So I think these are all definitely great things that we need to continuously have conversations about, continuously talk about. I appreciate each one of you for coming up. This has been a wonderful first live for me. I have enjoyed this conversation, and this is an amazing garden. And Abraham, thank you so much for coming and bringing your masculine energy and your logic to the conversation. Thank you, Sherelle. You are, I told you before in the Facebook group, you're amazing. I think you're amazing. I think you're beautiful. And you are my Louisiana sister. I'm from North Louisiana, but um, you are still my Louisiana sister. And Natalie, I think you're brilliant. I think you say things with such poise. And so I appreciate each of you for coming up here and really having the conversation. I hope that you come and continue to have more conversations on my channel. I'll have more lives, and I will see you next week, and I'll see you tomorrow on Conversations with King in the Garden. Okay, family, peace.
See ya. Thank you for having me.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Good
Right.
night.
Right.